Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our webcast, Getting Buy-in, How to Drive Organizational Success with DEI, presented by the Kaleidoscope Group. My name is Barbara Sanner, and I'll be your moderator today. We want our session to be interactive and engaging for you, so we hope you'll ask questions as they occur to you. In the GoToWebinar control panel, type your question into the box that says Enter a question for staff and click Send, and we'll ask your questions towards the end of today's session. If we don't get to your question, though, we'll follow up with you after the webcast. We're excited about our panelists today, who are thought leaders at the Kaleidoscope Group and experts in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Mitch Brown is Senior Consultant and Engagement Leader. Reginald Ponder is Executive Marketing Lead. And Lindsay Chardelli is Senior Business Development Consultant and will be fielding your questions today. Now I'll turn it over to Reginald to get us started.
Hi guys, I just want to take the moment, as Barb just said, to welcome you guys to our webinar. So thank you so much for joining us. If for any reason you'd like to connect with us at any time, you can again use the chat box. You can send us your information. You can ask us some questions. If you'd like for us to get back to you, you can use the chat box for all of that, and we'll make sure that we'll get back to you. So with that, before we actually get started, we're going to have a poll. And this first poll is a question. What would best describe why you are here today? Now you have a couple of choices and the poll is now open. The first is, I'm unsure how to approach this issue and I'm curious to learn. The second is to learn how to be an ally and support, but I really don't know how. And then the third is, I need resources to support others in learning this topic. And then finally, I'm not sure why I'm here. And that's okay, because if you're not sure, you'll get something from this and hopefully will help you be more sure. So the poll is now open.
Yep, so it's very easy, of course. Just select the option that is best representative of how you feel today for today's session, and we'll address that when we're done. Thank you for joining us today. We know that your time is valuable and we appreciate you taking the time to join us. I see we've got folks from all over the world with us today, which is very exciting. And we hope that this is a valuable session for you. I'm sure that it will be. So we'll give it another few seconds here for folks to vote, and then we'll show our results on the screen. Most people are saying that they need direction with what they're looking for with their organization.
Yeah, that's interesting here, Reggie. You know, a lot of people need support, resources, to support others in learning this topic. And I think the things that we're going to be talking about here today should help with that for sure. So excited about this conversation.
Well, before we get you all fired up, Mitch, let me go through a little bit about the Kaleidoscope Group, and then we'll get into your part. We have a tradition of DE&I, and we've been in business for over 30 years. We're led by our fearless leader, Doug Harris. We are a certified minority-owned business, and we have worked with over 800 clients, and it's really great that we have some people from all around the world because we have global experience. And our global experience has told us that that the way we do it in the United States is not the same way that we might do it in Italy and other countries, and vice versa. Additionally, we have about 40 staff, 25 associates, and again, about our people from around the world, we have 35 international facilitators and consultants. With that, again, I want to say that you can touch base with us at any time, and if you have some questions about what I just talked about, be sure to put that in the chat. I'd also want to go through just our philosophy and the way in which we approach business. The first one is really about flexibility. What we understand is that even if you have the same problem, it's not exactly the same problem because every business, every situation is unique. And because we understand that, we don't come to you with a cookie cutter approach. The second thing is that partnership. We really believe in partnership. Some companies might want to hire us to like, hey, just go off and make this go away or make this better. That's really not how we work. We know that you know your business and we know our business, and together we can really affect change. And when we talk about affecting change, this whole issue about results, this is just not a nice thing to do. It is also about how do we help you drive your business results. So when we're talking to you and we're working with you from a strategic perspective, we always have our eye on results. And then sustainability. How do you do this and continue to do it without 5 years later saying, oh man, I dropped the ball and I have to start all over? So we really work with the eye on how do we make this a sustainable proposition for your business. And then finally, I talked about that we have capabilities across a lot of industries with a lot of different businesses, and we're able to help many people in many different ways. With that, if you'd like for us to help you and you like to touch base with us in any kind of way, you can touch base with Lindsay. And I'm gonna have Lindsay introduce herself.
Thanks, Reggie. First, I want to say thank you all for joining us today. My name is Lindsay Chardelli. I am a senior business consultant with the Kaleidoscope Group. And if you would like to continue this conversation following the webinar, please feel free to email me directly. My email is lindsay.chardelli@kgdiversity.com. And we will also have my email listed at the end conclusion of this webinar. Thank you.
Well, excellent. Now, Mitch, you were chomping at the bit. You saw why people are here. Please introduce yourself as well.
All right. First and foremost, let me say thank you for being here. You could be anywhere right now, but with this hour, you chose to be here with us. And, just can't say enough about, the gratitude we have for your presence. I'm Mitch Brown, senior consultant, engagement leader with the Kaleidoscope Group. I've been doing this work for the past 7.5 years. I've been in management consulting for the last decade. And my main responsibility with my clients is helping them execute on their statements of work that they have with us, and primarily in the spaces of learning and development and education. So much of the things that we're talking about here today from the strategic standpoint, I've been working with a lot of different clients on driving buy-in, working with a lot of different clients on delivering some of our intellectual property in terms of conscious inclusion, unconscious bias, with their frontline employees. So I'm very, very, very happy to be here with you today having this conversation. Currently live in Charlotte, New York. Charlotte, New York. I just moved from New York, living in Charlotte, North Carolina now, and actually haven't been here for too long.
So what we're going to talk about today, when we look at our agenda, there are really three things that we're going to cover. The first is uncheck the box. The second is controlling the narrative. And the third is accountable responsibility. So Mitch, from an outcome perspective, what are you looking for people to get out of this?
Uncheck the box, controlling the narrative, accountable responsibility. That's the trajectory of the conversation. By the end of that conversation, we hope that you're better situated to do a few things. Lead your organization towards a sustained commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Based upon the poll results, that seems timely, right? Hopefully you're better positioned to lead conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is a complete, I think, a very, very important variable to completing this effort. And then lastly, we do want to talk about this idea of accountable responsibility. And what does that mean? And really, we want to drive some skills and really talk about the necessity of a few different skills, managing power and privilege, to help you signal buy-in, model inclusion, and really establish that accountability, not just with leadership, but across the organization. So let's go ahead and get into things here. First and foremost, right, our first section is about what checking the box. So you'll see here in this next slide a framework that we call our 3Ds, okay? Define, declare, and demonstrate. And unchecking the box, make no bounds about it, is something that is a role for leadership, okay? Unchecking the box is a role for leadership. So let's start here with the first D, define. What does that mean? First and foremost, leadership has to have a personalized business value that they define. So your website might say one thing, right? Your literature might say something, but you have to really personalize what the business value is, because people have to have a sense of why am I doing this, and how does this connect to, just to make something else? How does it help me sell more sprockets, right? How does this help me deliver on my goals and objectives? That's the first step of define.
So Mitch,
The
I'm
next
I'm
step.
I'm really happy that actually you're talking about that, because there's a lot of thought that sometimes when we talk about DE and I, that it's more about, it's a nice thing to do, it's great socially, but that it doesn't really impact the business. What say you, Mitch Brown?
Yeah, you know what, Reggie, that's a tricky question because it's sort of a both and, if you ask me. Yes, the right thing to do. It feels good emotionally for people, and that's nothing wrong with that at all. But you can't rest your laurels on that. It is very, very important for buy-in, for you to signal to others and clearly define, how does this help them do their job better? How does this help our organization be a better organization? It's when you marry those two things, right? It's the right thing to do, and it's a business imperative, that I think you really get the buy-in that you need from an organization. Otherwise, right, people might not prioritize the work around diversity, equity, and inclusion in the way that you need them to enable success.
Great, thanks, Mitch.
So, no problem. So that next piece there on the define, Reggie, is about defining organizational success, which is a good transition, right? Based upon what we just said. And this is very important because as the role of leadership, you need to establish your North Star, your vision. Most of the time, and this is just in my experience, people who do the work, we're super zealous. We got a lot of energy and high expectations around what we're trying to accomplish. And if you don't define organizational success up front very well, you can have a misalignment of expectations, and you can miss out on, again, what we're going to be talking about here a little later around, meeting others' expectations around the results that they want to get from these initiatives. The next step is declare. What does it mean in terms of declaration? What are we looking for here? Well, one, you got to declare commitment. And anytime that something important happens, Reggie, in an organization, you want to see if it's important or not, look at that signature line. Look at who it's coming from. Who's that email coming from? And you got to declare commitment in this space, just like you would do in any other facet of the business, when it's time to hit some revenue goals, right? When it's time to do anything else that is an important initiative, declaring that commitment from a leadership perspective is super, super important for buy-in. And that has to be cascaded throughout the organization, by the way. Next in the declaration space is something we call communicate the message. Now, you might be asking yourself, okay, communicate the message. I could do that, put together a communication plan, a communication strategy. I got it. Well, there is a skillful way to communicate the message and maybe a not so skillful way. So we're actually going to be talking about that here today, a little bit about communicating the message. So I'll table that for right now. The third piece here is demonstrate. And you see here, first and foremost, Reggie, you got to model inclusion. You can't just ask others to be inclusive without modeling it yourself.
So on that, Mitch, when you talk about modeling inclusion, it is a little tricky though, because you'll see a company or employees at a company, they'll say, well, look, your board doesn't have any representation. It doesn't look inclusive. Yet there is a plan in place to be inclusive, to attack DE&I. So on this modeling thing, how does that all work when maybe everything is not in place, at least from a visual perspective?
What a great question. This is a great example of how these things are connected. First off, I would start by saying that there are many different ways to model inclusion. Inclusion is about a depth and spectrum of things that we got to do on an everyday basis to create inclusive environments. That's number one. Number two, I'm going to just take us back to that conversation that we just had around defining organizational success. Here's a clear representation of when the expectations of your constituents, right, of your employees are one thing, right? And again, this is something that I see a lot in the marketplace, that for a lot of people, they may say, you know what, how inclusive, how diverse are we really? I don't see anybody that looks like me at the top of the organization. And that's a specific outcome, right, that people might want. But you see the significant importance of defining organizational success. because between that outcome and where an organization might be, there might be tons of things, right, that needs to happen to kind of deliver on that outcome. So that's why it's really, really important to help people understand that diversity, equity, and inclusion in most instances is about a journey. It is really about a journey and how you can, again, deliver results within a timeline or within what's right for that organization within that place. And that's that last one around demonstration, because you're right. I mean, and listen, I fault no person that says, that hypothetical as we posed it, because people are looking for results. People want to see not only people walk the walk, but people talk the talk. So be very, very, clear about what that means. And in essence, right, we're talking about unchecking the box, right? And checking the box to me, Reggie, just means that people are, throwing money at maybe what they consider a buzzword, right? Or they look around the marketplace, or they have peers and they said, oh, your company's doing this, I need to do this too. And that's what this framework is about, is going beyond that. Hence, unchecking the box. And when you do that and go beyond that, right, you get really intentional about what you're trying to accomplish and how you're trying to accomplish it. And I think that's important to signal buy-in. Again, people can be, people are more likely to buy in when they know that the aspiration is real versus, something that's kind of, again, just mythical.
So what I like that you talked about and looking at this model is talking about defining success and ending up with deliver results. So the definition part is real important to this. Is what you're trying to tell me is, okay, if you don't define the success but you get some outcomes or some results, they don't really match up, and because you haven't defined that. Is that what you're saying here?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And that starts in, again, that's the role of leadership. You got to have an alignment of expectations because that's important to everybody. I mean, just think about it, right? If you had an expectation that wasn't met, the likelihood that I'm going to buy into this or anything else that you're preaching around diversity, equity, inclusion, the probability that goes down. So, I mean, it's really important not only to just meet expectations here in the short term, but when we're talking about this idea of buy-in, it has significance in your long-term strategy.
So let's talk a little bit about because you touched on it when you talk about communicate the message. Let's actually talk about controlling the narrative.
Yes. So again, our next piece here is controlling the narrative. And this is where I said we're going to spend some time on this idea of communicating the D&I message, because you have to be skillful here. And I think this is an opportunity for a lot of people. If you're asking out there, I need resources to help me, support me in what I'm doing in my organization. Here's an important place to be, because no matter what you do, right, whatever you put in the defined space, however you see organizational success or what the business value is for your organization, this is the nexus between that and really, again, that demonstration and accomplishing, the results you want to. And here are some elements of communicating the D&I message. First and foremost, Reggie, it starts with your organization's D&I message. What is it, right? Where does it live? How does it live? I can tell you that a lot of my clients in the marketplace are, charged with, creating a landing point maybe on the website or putting it in terms of some of your literature. But oftentimes, best practice in the space is also, I've seen a lot of people incorporate this into their longstanding value pillars. And if it doesn't, get incorporated there, they may use one of their pillars as a springboard to say, well, how does, diversity, equity, and inclusion manifest itself through this value? And that's an important piece here when it comes to your organization's D&I message.
How does that, if at all, connect? You talk about maybe the pillars and the value, but how, if at all, does that connect with the mission or vision?
Well, it should be something that connects very well. It should be integrated, if you will. You can think about an organization's mission and vision as sitting at the top of their proverbial house. And everything that, goes up under that roof, right, should fall up under there and streamline to that mission and vision. So, and this is important also, right, to get buy-in, because when you integrate those things, diversity and equity and inclusion, because that much of importance, because it's really about our organizational success as a whole, right? And not just about what D&I does kind of off to the side, if that makes sense.
See, so I really like this, Mitch, because you connected something for me. Is that what you just connected is that the uncheck the box is saying, let's not just check some stuff. And the connection to the mission and vision should help ensure that we're not just checking some stuff.
Correct, correct. And it helps signal the again when you talk about declare the commitment. That's commitment. You put something and you change your values, right? Your pillars. That signals something huge. Again, remember I said in that declare commitment, what name is attached to it? What are the kind of things that are of other importance that are attached to it? And that's a couple of great ways to do that.
Excellent.
So that next step you see there, right after the D&I message from the organization, it says what? Your personal story. So in the last section, we talked a little bit about personalizing the business value. Why is this important to me to, i.e. sell more sprockets? But this right here is a position that anybody could take. Personalizing the story means that, but my website says one thing, but when Reggie and I sit down at lunch to talk about, where we stand on D&I, I can internalize that message for me. I can make it real. And that's something that has to be cascaded through the organization in terms of, what does that personal story mean? What does it look like? And it's genuine, it's authentic. From a leadership standpoint, it may talk about one's learning curve that, not everything came, super fast to me in this space. And something that I'm continuing to work on. But people have to have a sense of that, right? And have to have that personal story attached to that, because otherwise it becomes boilerplate. You know what I mean? You ever seen something on a website that you don't really, take to? It's just there. It doesn't live in the real culture of the organization. It's just there.
I think it connects to when you were talking about the values. If a company puts out their values and for some reason you can't connect personally to those values, then they're meaningless, especially in terms of people trying to adapt them and incorporate them into their daily lives.
Yes, for sure, for sure. And in this next space, right, in bullet number 3, talks a little bit about reaction versus response. And here's what I want to call out, Reggie, because communication is what? It's a two-way street, right? You ever have Reggie somebody say, "Hey, you ain't called me in a while," and
Yes, yes,
you
yes.
probably say you ain't picked up the phone and called me either, right? So part of communicating the message in a skillful way is about what do we do when we receive messaging, especially messaging that might be in a place that maybe it may be a different perspective or point of view that we might have. And again, remember I told you a lot of people who lead the work, we're zealous. We are energized around this. We want to see results not today, but like yesterday. So sometimes, right, that where we might sit might be uniquely situated in the bigger scheme of things in the organization. So you got to be in a place where you are, what we call not reacting, which is more about being visceral, right? When you're somebody tells you something that you don't know, you likely sometimes you defend, right? You sit in that.
So Mitch, I do have a question about that. Aren't there times when you need to react to the environment rather than waiting for a thought out, tailored response plan?
Lindsay, great question. Great question. And that to me takes us to that 4th bullet. So I have some more I'm going to show you around reaction and response. So let's table that for a second. But there is a time when your organization, your consumers are looking at you as a company and saying that what's your perspective and point of view, and I need to really know that right now. And one thing that I think everybody here that's in this webinar and this webcast can attest to, in the past year and a quarter, this country has experienced a lot of tension, right? Racial tension around racial inequity, all kind of things going out there from what I would call a societal diversity concern. And we've had many clients come to us and say, "Hey, people are expecting our point of view or position on this." And why are they expecting it? Because they are having a real strong emotional, kind of reaction to what's going on. Why are they expecting it? Because maybe your competitors are putting out messages. But I'll tell you what, I think even in this place, Lindsay, you still have to be in what I call, response and not reaction. Because when people, again, you want to be able to communicate skillfully. Even if you want to go faster, right? You still want to be able to communicate in a way that you're communicating the right way, right? And not just right away. Right? It's a big difference between the two. And again, what this is going to help you do when you're doing this skillfully is that you might be able to pivot a little bit more faster, but you're still doing it in a responsive way. Still doing it in a responsive way. So let's take a look at this next slide, Reggie. Let's walk people through this context of what this means.
Thank
So,
you, Mitch.
no problem, Leslie, no problem. So, here is a way to think about this reaction versus response trajectory here. And you can think about this. Let's make it personal, right? Let's make it personal. So Reggie comes up to me and says something that Reggie's, gives me one of them Reggieisms. Mitch, you're not that welcoming. Okay. And I'm like, Reggie, what are you talking about? Ask Lindsay, ask Barb, ask somebody. They know me. I'm very, very welcoming. You don't know me at all. I defend, right? I defend.
You know what I would normally say, because we're both sports people, I would say you're not a good teammate.
Right. Or, right. And I would be like, hey, you know what? I'm a great teammate. I got the awards to show it and the captain C on my chest to show it as well. But I might defend still. But then that next stage is minimization. Because you know what, Reggie, I might say, you know what, this week you're telling me I'm not a great teammate. And last week you told Lindsay the same thing. And the week before that, you told Barb the same thing. So you're always complaining about somebody being a teammate. So what do? I take your point of view and perspective and I minimize it, right? Doesn't mean as much because you're always complaining.
You make me a complainer, and so the issue now becomes about me being a complainer as opposed to what we initially were talking about.
Exactly. And that last step you see there is transfer, which people do this a little bit sometimes too. People say, hey, Reggie says, hey, Mitch, you're not a great teammate. And I say, well, Reggie, if you pass the ball a little bit more, right? If you were a better teammate, then I'd be a better teammate. So I transfer the blame to you, right? So if you advance the slide for me here, you could see that there's a clear distinction between those first three elements: defend, minimize, and transfer. Those are reactions. It's emotional. It's visceral. It's like when you go to the doctor, you sit on that bench, and they hit you with that little thing, and your knee goes like that, right? If you got that tendon there, right? It's a reaction. You don't think about it. It just happens. And what I'm encouraging people to do, based upon what our, hypothesis, analogy is here, and that hypothetical situation that Lindsay talked about, is that you got to move below this line, and that's about acceptance and exploration. Meaning that you have to be able to seek to understand a perspective that's different from my own. And it's not about agreement, because people see accept, right, and they think, oh, I have to agree with this other position. No, acceptance has nothing to do with agreement. They're two
So
different
so
things.
so how does that work in this situation? I've told you that you're not a good teammate, and the reason I don't think you're a good teammate is that you pass the ball to everybody else except me. So uh, how do you accept that? I'm not clear.
Well, this is how you get buy-in, Reggie. This is how you get buy-in from people who are not already, bought in. It is the idea that I have to be process oriented. So it's not about me saying that, you know what, Reggie doesn't know what he's talking about. I passed him the ball 4 times last game. It's more about me trying to understand the perspective of why does Reggie see this way? And that's where people get cut off. They don't make it to exploration, Reggie. They say, you know what, I don't agree with you, so therefore I'm not going to accept your point of view. I'm going to reject it. And what I'm telling you to do is to get buy-in, you got to honor everybody's point of view and perspective and be willing to explore why that person sees that circumstance, the world, in the way that they do.
But what you're saying is really key, is that you're saying that I don't have to agree with Reggie. I just need to understand where he is coming from. And when I understand that, then that is a better opportunity for us to have better communication, which means better buy-in.
That's a better opportunity for me to be a better teammate, which means that it's an opportunity for better buy-in. Because here's what happens. You know what happens? Reggie feels heard. Reggie feels like I didn't dismiss him, right? And Reggie might even feel more appreciative of the stance I'm taking because he knows that I might not see things like he does. So, I mean, you got the opportunity here to when you talk about getting buy-in, you're going to have to, the the title of this webcast assumes that there's somebody who's not bought in. So this is an effective strategy, right? And it won't maybe work with everybody, but the idea is that if you're process oriented in this way, this is an effective strategy again to get buy-in from multiple constituents. Because for something to be successful, you got to have your whole organization on board and not just a few people.
I think that's a great segue when you're saying have our whole organization on board when we start to talk about accountable responsibility.
Yes, yes. So let's go there. So we've talked about unchecking the box. We've talked about controlling the narrative, being skillful around the D&I message. This last piece is what I call accountable responsibility. And you're sitting there thinking, what is accountable responsibility? Accountable responsibility is a leadership's ability to hold others accountable and empower others to be responsible for the work. That's true buy-in, right? Buy-in is not something that I could just have, in as a leader, and it doesn't cascade, anywhere else. I got to have everybody else to do it, and to do that, you got to empower other people. And part of that is a question around two things. We're going to have a conversation here around two skills that are going to help you in this space. How do you manage power and how do you manage privilege? Let's start here with power, because you need to empower others, right, to be accountable. You need to empower others to be responsible in this space. There are some different ways in which leaders wield power, Reggie. Different ways. So let me go through 5 of those ways here that you see on the screen. The first is what we call coercive power. Coercive power. Reggie, in my household, when you were growing up, you had 2 chances. Did something wrong the first time, you get a warning. The second time, it might be something more consequential. So that's what we call coercive power, right?
I'm with you. I'm with you on this one, Mitch, on coercive power, because I have to use coercive power here in my household a couple of times as well. So what's wrong with coercive power?
Well, all of these different types of power in terms of how you wield them and demonstrate them, they have a time and place, right? It calls for situational analysis. And I'll tell you, in my experience in working with organizations and working specifically with diversity, equity, inclusion, coercive power is not something that has sustainability. Yeah, you might get people to do something in the moment, right? But over the long haul, people don't, listen, people just are not receptive as much to coercive power. They resent it, they rebel against it, right? They may organize against it. Again, you don't want people to do something because they feel threatened. That's not where we want to be, right? The next is what we call compliance power, or incentivizing people, reward, the carrot, if you will, right? Reggie, there's a lot of places in terms of compliance power that you might have some examples, right? But it may be, even if you think about a rewards program, that I'd Uber 4 or 5 times a week, and eventually I'll get enough points to get a free ride, right?
I
So that's
like that.
compliance power, right? I do like it too. I like it too. I don't like I like the free ride, but guess what? You have to pay for that free ride. So again, in this place, right, it has a time and place, situational. But you also want to think about here, there's that question you asked me, is it the right thing to do, right? Or is it a business imperative? And if your answer to yes is to both of those, right, a lot of times you don't want to have people do something just because of what might be incentivized for them, right? But that's not a bad thing to motivate people, right? But at the core of it, you want that to be coming from somewhere else.
And you're
Legitimate
saying
power.
at the core of it, you'd like it to come from values as opposed to some incentive.
Well, I think yes, values instead of incentives, and at the bottom here you see reverent power. We'll get there. That's where would want it to come from.
Okay.
That's why we wanted to come from. Again, compliance power might be needed to motivate people to do something, right? It's a strategy that you could use for situationally, but overall, you want people to be in that reverent place. Legitimate power is the other power that people will, and that's positional or authoritative power. You can think about that in the context of, right, in a team situation, a coach and players, military, right? You are doing things because you're falling in line and you're showing deference to a superior or elder. Then there's expert power. where you are wielding power based upon your weighted input or confidence, right? So you go to the doctor has expert power. You go to get your car fixed, right? You don't know much about fixing cars, or do you, Reggie? You don't know anything about
No,
fixing
no, no. Don't talk to me about
cars.
cars. These new cars these days, you can't even find the engine. But I do
Uh,
have a question for you
yes,
about expert power. Is that there's weighted input when you are the expert, though, right? I, I,
correct.
I, I'm the automotive expert, so you do need to listen to what I'm saying here. I think you need an oil change.
Correct. But what often happens is sometimes with expert power, competence power, we lose the connection we might have with uh, void of a better term here, the common man, right? A lot of times with expert power, what people can do is you can talk past people or over people, right? And you can marginalize the necessity to get buy-in from others just because of who you are or the position you hold, right?
I
And
like that. I like that a lot, Mitch, because I've experienced that in the workplace. But an example, I guess, that everybody can say is I've experienced that with my doctor, where they
yes,
talk over me. They're the expert. Their weighted input is 100. My input is 0.
right. And what happens is in some cases you lose people versus you alienate people more than you do gain buy-in. Also in the workplace, right, you can have situations where again, people again their input or their value feels marginalized. So again, they lack the opportunity to here to kind of really be empowered because of, again, they don't think that they don't see the confidence in themselves, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
That's good.
Yep. This last one here is what I would prefer you to be in. Now, what I'm saying to you is what? Situational analysis. There's different reasons to wield different type of power and exhibit these things. But when it comes overall to buy-in, right? And that's the topic of today's webcast, you want reverent power. You want people to do things because they trust and respect who you are. Let's go back to that basketball example, that team example. I told you I used to wear that C on my shirt, and that is the truth. That is, as they would say, no cap. And you would show up, Reggie, before practice, stay after practice, look at film, and after a while, you would notice other people doing the same thing. And why are they doing that, Reggie? They're doing it because they trust and respect the work ethic and the work that you're put in. They're bought in. So yeah, I could say, hey, if you don't do this, we got to run some laps. We got to do suicides. I could say, hey, if you do this, we're going to do a pizza party. Have a pasta party. I could say, you know what, I'm the captain or I'm the coach, and you got to listen to me. You got to do this, right? Or I could say, hey, you know what? Look at me. I score 20 points a game. This is what I do. If you want to score 20 points a game, then you should do this too. But when people have that, trust and respect based upon the reverent power that you're exhibiting, that's what you're after. Because people are bought in and doing it because they believe in you and they trust you. And that's what, as a leader, what more can you ask for? So
Wow.
what we want to
I
do
like
out
that.
there now is check in with all of you to see where you are on this topic of leadership power with a couple of polls. And Barb, I'll bring you back in now.
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. I appreciate that. Great discussion here. So let's put our second poll up on the screen here. How would you characterize the style of your organization's leadership power with regards to DEI? And we cover each of those particular types of power that Mitch and Reggie just discussed: coercive, compliance, legitimate, expert, and reverent. If you could take a moment to just select your option there. And thank you all for participating. We value your input and participation today. It's not just about us talking about the theory, but it's action oriented as well. So thanks for your actions to participate here. And we've got some good responses coming in. Thank you all for joining us again today. It's great to see so many people on this particular webcast. Obviously, this is a topic that is hitting close to home for a lot of people. So we'll just give it a few more seconds here, let everybody get their votes in, and we'll show the results on the screen.
Okay. Okay. So some opportunity to work towards that reverent place. All right.
Mhm.
We
I
got one
see.
more.
It's really interesting, Mitch, because there are some people here who believe their company is in that reverent power area, which I think is excellent. I'm surprised that there's not a lot in the expert power, because a lot of times people listen to what we know as opposed to who we are and how we use that knowledge. So the 2% is actually a little bit surprising to me. So your thoughts?
Yeah, yes, definitely. But I mean, I think I envisioned that there would be a vast variance in the responses that we got. And absent, you're right. I mean, aside from expert power, we do have that represented here. So it looks like a lot of opportunity, out there for folks in terms of this, and maybe just some coaching around some of that situational analysis, right? Going deeper into that.
Excellent.
Okay, and our next poll, we're going to get this one up on the screen here. How well do you believe your organization's leadership uses power to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion? From very well to perhaps not as good as it could be, or you're just not sure. If you could take a moment there to submit your vote to us, we'll see where folks are standing with this, where organizations are with this.
And again, while you guys are waiting for the results to come up, if there's reasons that you'd like to reach out to us, if you have questions for us, you can put that in the chat. And again, Lindsay, if we don't answer your question today, Lindsay will reach back out to you as well.
Interesting. Not as well as it could be. Well, I guess that's why folks are joining us today, because there's some areas where we can focus and improve.
Yep. Yep.
Mhm.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome insight. Awesome data. All right. So the next thing we're going to do here is talk a little bit about that second piece, right? So we'll close out our conversation talking privilege.
When we talk about privilege, that's one of those trigger words. It really gets people like, oh, okay, you're talking about privilege. How do you define privilege when you're talking about it here?
First and foremost, when we talk privilege, if your mind is thinking, this privilege, that privilege, there are all different types of privilege out there. But one of the key consistent things in this conversation is I need to be assessing privilege based upon myself, not other people. That's the first place we start from our philosophy. And it's understanding the unearned positive advantages and absence of barriers that I might have. And everybody has that, no matter who you are. And why is that important? Because it creates an opportunity for you to establish equity and create fairness opportunities for others. You're best situated to do so. So when we talk about ways to manage workplace privilege, here specifically, we're talking about some of the privileges I might have as a leader, right?
Okay.
But you know what? This is something from this topic or this conversation, and we're not going deep into that here today. But I always tell people quickly that for me specifically, I got privilege in physical ability. That when I lived in New York City, I lived in a neighborhood of all brownstones. If I wanted to access floors in that brownstone, all I had to do, Reggie, was walk up and down those steps. If you couldn't walk up and down the steps, Reggie, you need a lift to get from floor to floor. So there is somewhere, right, where able-bodiedness, right? I have an opportunity to create fairness and equity for people who come into my house by installing something like that or making sure that they have those accommodations.
Great. Thank
Within
you.
the workplace, as a leader, building authentic relationships across lines of difference. Super important. Super important. You want to talk about buy-in? Listen. Reggie, somebody I try to sell you some Samoas, right? You're probably not going to buy them, but your niece comes in there, right? And she's got that authentic relationship with you. You're going to get all the boxes of Samoas she's got. Because you're
Honestly, I'm going to buy the Samoas regardless because I like them so much, but I get your point.
all right, all right. Other ways to manage workplace privilege, to demonstrate empathy. And some of that is, again, your opportunity to live in others' experience and seek to understand. When you signal that and you do that to others, wow, they're going to ride with you. I often had people tell me that, people don't really care what you know until they know how much you care. So this idea for employees, when you show empathy and when you lead from empathy, employees, they show up for you. You might want to consider data and look at the trends in your organization and the different metrics you have to look at and identify what inequities are there.
For many
Right, because
business leaders, this is real important though, is
mhm.
that looking at the data, because for them the touchy-feely qualitative stuff, uh, many leaders kind of throw that away, which I think is a mistake, but that the data is real important.
Yeah, but again, buy-in is about, making all different walks of life subscribe. So data is important. I think that's why this bullet point is here, because some people, Reggie, to your point, they want to see that, right? So buy into them, I mean, diversity, equity, inclusion. Well, why do we need to be diverse, equitable, and inclusive? Well, here's data to show that we're not, right? And for some people, that's the compelling argument that they need to hear. Identifying the blind spots and bias we might have. And as a leader, I tell you what, if you assume that your world, your organization is set up for you, just like it's set up for everybody else, we call that operating in bliss. Oftentimes, Reggie, you might not have a clue, right? And if you are coming off as that type of out of touch person, out of touch leader, then that is going to inhibit your ability to get buy-in, because you really need to be in tune with the perceptions of others. And that's what that last bullet is about. Tune into community perceptions and issues, and not just the community at large, but your organizational community, the communities in which your businesses and organizations operate and exist. Those are important factors here. So here's our last question for you, based upon where you might be and your opportunity to develop here on privilege.
Yep, so we'll put this one up on the screen as well. And this time we're asking, which workplace strategy for managing leadership privilege do you see as a growth opportunity for your organization? And hopefully that is showing up on the screen there. I think it is. If you can indulge us for one more poll here and submit your responses. This is great. Thank you all for participating. Yeah, is the organization building authentic relationships across lines of difference, demonstrating empathy, considering the data and inequities, identifying blind spots and bias, tuning into the community perceptions and issues? Perhaps it's crossing a couple of different borders there. That can also be the case. All right, so we'll go ahead and show our results on the screen here. Thank you all for participating. Interesting. So building authentic relationships and identifying blind spots and bias are kind of neck and neck.
Awesome. Okay. So again, a lot of opportunity for growth here. And this is good insight, good feedback to have. And it's a great place for us to kind of jump in here and position our closing, because we'd love to know, where you all are, if you have any questions. And Reggie, I'm going to turn it back over to you and invite Lindsay back in our conversation.
Yeah,
And
excellent. Thanks so much, Mitch. Again, we'd like to thank you guys. As you can see, there's so many different reasons why you guys were here, and the type of data that we looked at in these polls, the types of things that we do to help your organization move forward. If you want to reach out to us at any point in time, again, you can, and Lindsay will talk to you about that.
Yeah, thanks, team. Okay, so we've got people all over the world joining us today, and our polls and our chats are blowing up right now, so I have to be selective in terms of what questions going to bring to the table right now, but I think we have time for about 3 of them. So one of them that is pressing for a couple of participants today: will commitment to DEI continue with new management? How do you ensure the upper management stays enthusiastic and bought into the value of DEI initiatives?
Oh, that's a great question. It's challenging for sure. And it's two ways to look at new management. If you're talking about from the top of the house, I think that's why it's important for the organization to, again, responsibility and being accountable is a two-way street as well, just like communication. And that's something you got to hold your leaders accountable to. So when they are defining what organization success looks like, or when you're defining what's important to you as employees, make that known. But then there also in that question is, well, middle level management, right? If we have some turnover from maybe not the complete top of the house, but people who are having a main responsibility and touch point for cascading the message, cascading accountability and responsibility, cascading empowerment, then that's one of the things that you have to make as a part of your talent acquisition strategy. Ask those type of questions of people. Is this important to you? In the accountability space, from an organizational standpoint, Lindsay, organizations make this a part of people's performance reviews and evaluations. So it is, embedded within the culture, not only from it's on our website, but it's real because this is something we're measuring you by to gauge how much of an inclusive leader you are.
Yeah, and hopefully DEI is kind of integrated into the onboarding process in and of itself. So absolutely. Another great question is, how do you make DEI a part of your day-to-day work and make it real and tangible for everyone involved, specifically from a leadership standpoint?
Yeah, I think that's a great question as well. One is a couple avenues. One, as a leader, we have huge curriculum around leading inclusively and what that means. And you have an opportunity to do that every day because most businesses that if you're a leader in your organization, you're leading, guess what? People. So you got the opportunity to do that in terms of how you give and receive feedback. You got the opportunity to do that in terms of how you create diverse teams. There are so many different examples of how this lives every day in terms of what you do. Right. So, I would start there from that standpoint. And then from a functional standpoint, right? We've had some HR teams come to us and say, Lindsay, they'll say, well, how do I think about diversity in the hiring process? What does that mean for me in terms of diverse interview panels, slated candidates, strategies around how we go about sourcing? So, there's a wealth of knowledge here in this space, that, we've been working with our clients on to how do you live this every day?
Thank you, Mitch. It's really helpful. Are there any tips on driving interest and identifying blind spots with leadership?
Great question. Great question. So with the blind spots, I think it starts from an educational standpoint because essentially people don't know what they don't know. And Lindsay, what the biggest thing is we coach is you need to have a appetite to seek to understand what you don't know. You have to have the ability to be, have enough, exhibit enough. We said this, it exhibits leadership maturity to help people, to allow people to understand what you don't know. My grandfather used to have a saying, you can walk in any room and learn something from everyone. And if you got that kind of attitude as a leader, you should want to, be privy to that type of information around blind spots and biases. But I think it first, from our kind of trajectory, the philosophy starts with education around the mindset and, really about, how you're showing up, right? And we oftentimes do that, Lindsay, as you know, through talking to our clients about unconscious bias and those kind of things. But yeah, that's what would be my tip or suggestion.
Awesome. Thank you, Mitch. And I'm sure this is a burning question for everybody on the call today. How do you get started with DEI? What are the first steps to DEI success for those that are listening in?
Believe it or not, the first stop. The first thing you do is email lindsay.chardelli@kguniversity.com, and that's gonna send you on your way. No, seriously. I think I mean, honestly, it may be an assessment, a self-assessment of where do you want to be as an organization and understanding where your gaps are. I mean, because that's important. Because that's what happens when people call us is like, hey, we got an idea of what our gaps are, but you might want to have somebody who's an expert in that field understand and take a opportunity to answer that question for your organization as well. And that's a part of that piece in the prior question. It's like you may not know what you don't know. So our assessment team here at the Kaleidoscope Group is great in uncovering some of those things. A lot of times clients come with us with their own, output around, what they can do better. But I would set it in jest. But I think, you know, starting that conversation with somebody like the Kaleidoscope Group, or if you got internal focuses or teams.
Awesome. That's helpful. And then I think we might have time for just one more. Is a top-down approach better than a bottom-up, Mitch? Why?
I mean, in the context of this conversation, buy-in only happens from top down. Buy-in happens from top down. From the sheer, you know, unless you're in an employee-owned, employee-led organization, which even in those situations, like the Green Bay Packers are employee-owned, so to speak. I mean, the community owns the Packers, but there's still leadership within that organization. You still got to put people in place. So that's what I would say specifically. Is there a better way? I don't know. I've seen it both ways. I've seen grassroots, organic, you know, movement from organizations. And I'll tell you this, it's an easier thing to do when it's from the bottom up, when it's organic, because you know what, people are, you know, they need it, they want it, right? In some ways, Lindsay, it's like innovation in some ways always comes from like the ground up, because you know it's something that the people just need and they want it. You know, but both trajectories play a good role. You know, I don't have a clear cut answer for this. I know the person probably wants one, but it's both ways, and there's some significant importance to doing it either way.
Well, that's great, Mitch. I think we're up on our time. Firstly, again, we want to thank you guys for joining us. You can reach out, as you can see, we have our contact information there. Yeah, thank you so much, because we know you could have been spending your time somewhere else, and we really appreciate it. Hope to connect with you soon.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.